Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. So it's been quite an eventful day in Marvel Contest of Champions. We had our first dev diary released today on the future of questing in the contest from the questing team. Now early this week, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, the days just kind of seemed to blend together under quarantine, but I posted a list of things on the Twitters, things that I would like to see change to Act 6. So in general, reducing attack values, allowing 4 stars, lowering the gate requirements, and then a bunch of stuff about specific nodes and utility and champion requirements that I think needed to be reworked. So rather than go through the entire blog post today in agonizing detail, I just wanted to list kind of 5 things that I liked and 5 things that I think I did not care much for from today's announcements. So let's get right into it. So the first thing I liked is that they are reducing attack values across the entirety of Act 6. Now, I expected, or requested rather, I said a 35 to 50% decrease across the board in both 6.3 and 6.4. And I was surprised to see that they actually made this value higher. So they're going to be reducing it 40 to 60% in 6.4, bringing those values down to a much more manageable spot, and then they're going to adjust 6.3 in the earlier chapters accordingly. So this is a really great change. I think this fixes half of the problem that I had and most of the people had with Act 6. Bringing non-optimal champs to a fight now won't be as punishing because the block damage won't be nearly as bad, and you can probably be able to take more than one combo without getting completely wrecked. So I am glad to see that for sure. So number 2 thing I liked is the champion boss rework. In my list I called out that the no retreat node and the burden of might node were both the biggest problems that I had with that boss. So they're going to be removing the no retreat link completely. I'm guessing they're going to replace it with something else. I don't think they'll leave 2 open paths to the champion. And they're also decreasing the block penetration, which is huge. If you've done this fight at least once, you know that taking a blocked hit from the champion on top of the already ridiculous attack value that he has does a huge chunk of your health and damage. And especially on nodes or links like No Retreat, where your choices are take degen or take block damage, that was a huge problem. So I'm glad to see that they are reducing that. They're taking the nullify damage down. I didn't really seem to notice this too much when I did my exploration of that chapter, so maybe that was just me though. And then the dexterity requirements are being reduced from 5 to 3. I could take or leave this change. I thought the 5 was fine, but 3 I think will make the fight more accessible to people, which is not a bad thing for sure. All right, so number 3 thing I liked is this boss rush that they announced. I'm a big fan of these boss rushes. I think the last one we had was when 6 stars were about to be released, and that was quite some time ago. So this one sounds pretty cool. It's going to be like a 6-week thing, and there'll be a different boss each week for 5 weeks, and then the final week will be all 5 bosses in a row. So that will be cool. I'm very much looking forward to that. I think that looks like it's coming out next month, late next month, so not too long to wait for that. Number 4 thing I thought was interesting was the idea that a quest could have multiple final bosses. And I like this because I think that it deals with the problem of utility requirements in a way that I hadn't thought of previously. So if you think of like a fight like Mr. Sinister in 6.2 where you really need to have a poison immune champion who can either outdamage his healing and he also needs to be able to handle the EMP mod node and has to have a fury buff for caustic temper as well. And short of having a stacked Captain Marvel, you really need like a specific synergy, either the Heimdall or Warlock synergy, in order to make a champ viable for that fight. But if you consider maybe that there was an alternate final boss in that chapter, one with a wholly different set of requirements, that increases the chances that a player will have the necessary counters to complete that chapter. And if they give you the option, like, it depends on how they work exploration. Like, if they're going to say you have to defeat each boss at least once, but then for the rest of exploration, you can choose either one you want. Or if they just say, either boss counts for exploration. But I think this is a good change. More player agency is good. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually implement that. And similarly, they announced this idea of champion swapping. So that's a feature in incursions right now. And again, it'll be weird to see. Not weird. It'll be interesting to see how they actually implement it. I was kind of lukewarm on that idea in the first place because in incursions, if you swap in a champion, the champion that you swap out is gone for that run. And the champion that you swap in is stuck with the health pool of the champion that left. So you're not going to be able to heal up for free. I wouldn't expect that anyway. And what kind of turned me around on the idea of swapping in a quest is how you could use it for synergies. So if you're doing a particularly difficult path, for example, and you want, I need to devote 5 champions who can all counter these nodes on this path. And then at the end of that path, you say, okay, I'm going to swap in my boss killer champ, and then I'm going to use the other 4 spots on my team for synergies to help make my boss killer champ more viable. So the example I was thinking of is like Void, for example. I could swap in Void and bring in Killmonger to get some regen on him, maybe Omega Red if I had one for a little extra degen, some things like that. So I think the swapping could be cool. It depends on how frequently you're able to do it. If there are going to be like specific spots on each path that you'll be able to do it. So looking forward to seeing how that works. And the last thing that I liked, and I felt like this post was kind of actually talking directly to me, is they're talking about reducing the mental load on the player base. So, and then this first line here, asking players to draft complex battle plans to accomplish a single path in story content is a big ask. So if you followed my channel for any length of time, you know that I am very detail-oriented. I keep massive amounts of huge spreadsheets to track everything I do. Act 6, no different. I have a huge Google spreadsheet that has each chapter, each quest, each path, each fight detailed, the team that I used for that path, the champion that I used for each fight on every path. It's ridiculous. And I would look forward to the day when I don't have to do that. Because I feel like for me personally, it's necessary right now, because the node and the buff combinations are so complex that I need to go fight by fight and say, okay, I can bring Venom to these 3 fights because they're Spider-Verse champs and it's the Gast and Spry node, but I need to bring some other champ for the other nodes, etc., etc. So I don't really like going into a path blind and just brute forcing my way through. That's not really like how I like to play the game. But if I didn't have to be so detailed about it, I think that would be nice. So looking forward to a much simpler in terms of, not necessarily in terms of difficulty, but in terms of complexity, amount of nodes and combinations in Act 7 or Book 2 or whatever they're going to call it. So, all right, so in terms of things that I didn't like, the first one is by far the biggest. So it's this idea that they're going to be opening up a focus group in order to fix the individual problem areas of Act 6. And I have a problem with this because, the community has been providing a lot of really good and really constructive criticism to Kabam over the past several months, not only on Act 6 as a whole, but on many individual problem fights. And I outlined some of these in particular in that list that I talked about at the beginning. So, Acid Wash Mysterio, Thunderstruck King Groot, there's that Venom the Duck with Gimme and Spectre, there's the Gwenpool with Clapback and Do You Bleed, what was the other one? Oh, the Taskmaster with Crit Me With Your Best Shot and Terminal Velocity. These fights have all been called out numerous times, but the response seems to be, yes, we hear all of your complaints, we hear all of your feedback, but instead of doing something about it, we're going to get 20 or 30 random people and ask them what they want to do about it. And more to the point, the way that they're doing this is by sending out a survey with a single question on it. It's something like, give us a fight that you don't like and tell us why. So I don't really know how they're going to pick out 20 or 30 players who will be able to provide honest, good criticism and actionable feedback to Kabam when there are probably going to be hundreds, if not thousands of people applying to be in this focus group. So they're basing your qualification off of your one response. So, and I'm not going to lie, I applied to be in the focus group. I don't expect to be picked because the chances are obviously pretty low because I'm sure a ton of people are going to apply. But I answered the question honestly, and I provided a comprehensive explanation for it, in the hopes that even if I'm not picked, somebody there sees that and maybe acts on it. So not a big fan of the focus group. I feel like they could have at least addressed a few of the most complained about fights at the very minimum. So we'll see what happens with this focus group. I don't think we can expect any actionable stuff. I'm saying actionable a lot, aren't I? I don't think we can expect any realistic changes made to these kinds of utility requirements until probably the end of the year. And that's a long time to wait for people who have been seriously stuck and roadblocked at some point in Act 6 because of one of these fights. So very disappointing part of that blog post. Second thing I really didn't like is that there weren't a lot of details released, and it's really just a lot of theory, just kind of vague statements like, fewer buffs, and we're going to have lanes ranging from easy to hard. And, they've had several weeks now since kind of this all came to a head to really consider some stuff. But to really have like no details ready to present, or even tease, maybe I'm nitpicking a little because there's just so much information in this blog post, but some of it just feels a little bit like a word salad. I would have appreciated some specifics, calling out examples of problem lanes, and this is maybe what we would like to do to fix it. Etc. So, third thing I really didn't quite like is that the timeline on all this stuff is pretty vague. The stuff like variants and the boss rush were given dates, presumably because they're already completed or close to completed. But other than the champion boss rework, none of the proposed changes were given any sort of time frame. Especially the attack values. I feel like that was an easy win that they could say, listen, we know exactly what we're going to do. We're cutting these by, across the board. We're going to stick these into, the next update. Maybe not. I'm sure the July patch is already done, but maybe they do like a, 28.1, like a midway patch. So, would have appreciated a bit more detail on the timeline for sure. The fourth thing I didn't really care about, and this is just a personal thing for me, is the music. And that's because I don't play with the music on. I don't care about the music. If they add one more song, maybe I'll play with it for like a week, but then after that it's going to get old. I'm sure I'll check it out just to see how it is, but in general, the music is extremely repetitive. The sound effects are repetitive because you're doing literally thousands of fights a week. This doesn't really do anything for me. And the last thing that I didn't really care for, again, mostly because it doesn't apply to me, I don't think, is this Summer of Wales that they're going to be coming out with later this summer. So, they spent an entire blog post talking about how stuff was too complicated, and there were too many buffs, and there was, too much narrow utility requirements, etc., etc. And their response is to make a brand new and probably very lucrative mode for the top 0.01% of players. And I'm sure it's going to be very expensive to complete, because they know as well as us that the people who have the rosters capable of doing this are also the people who have the ability and desire to drop as much money as possible, as much money as it will take, rather, to complete it. So, and I'll be interested in watching some of the bigger names, work through this content on day one, probably. But in my experience, in my observation, what Kabam considers finger-breakingly difficult, it turns out to not be the case. If you recall, they talked about the Abyss being the new Everest. I think I've called that out before, and it was explored fully within a week. So I expect this to be a similar story. So yeah, lots of information today. Some good, some bad, mostly positive. I would say more good than bad for me anyway. Looking forward to some of this stuff coming, hopefully sooner rather than later. So let me know in the comments what you think about the announcements from today. What did you like? What did you not like? Do you play with the music on or off? I can't be the only one who plays with the music off, because I hate the music. So, and please hit that like button for me. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.